The 80s were the decade of boldness, where everything was cranked up 10 notches. Did you own shoulder pads big enough to land an airplane, hair crimped like an electric shock, or maybe even wear a kitchen clock around your neck? It was an era that was both dazzling and a little crazy. Today, join us on a fun trip back to the 80s to explore the 20 most cringe-worthy things that will make you cover your face, shake your head, and laugh helplessly. Geometric patterned shirts. The 80s didn't accept subtlety. It demanded a boom, and nothing showed that better than geometric patterned shirts. These mobile abstract artworks exploded onto the 80s scene with zigzags and colors so contrasting they gave you a headache. Blazing turquoise, fiery neon pink, electric purple, and mysterious black were all combined chaotically, yet they made perfect sense in the cultural context of the time. It was as if someone asked, "How many triangles, squares, and neon stripes can we cram onto one shirt?" And the designers replied, "All of them, and then some." Those shirts looked like they just walked out of a cheesy, outdated sci-fi movie where designers thought the future meant an endless color nightmare. The most astonishing thing, they were everywhere. Office workers, party people, even those just out for a stroll. Everyone wore these flashy shirts that looked like mobile billboards. And somehow, the crazier the pattern, the higher the price. Some were sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars just for having a few more layers of confusing geometric shapes or eye-straining blended colors. Today, those shirts can still make you the star of any 80s theme party. But be careful. If you dare wear them on a regular Tuesday, people will think you just stepped out of a time machine or escaped a neon dream from Miami Vice. Over-the-top hairdos. In the 80s, doing your hair wasn't just a morning routine, it was an ambitious art performance where spectacular volume mattered more than style. To achieve that perfect high poof or that shellacked, side-swept look, you needed the courage to turn your bathroom into a literal construction site. Mousse was slathered onto hair in huge quantities as if it were mandatory sunscreen, followed by the terrible heat from a hot curling iron, sometimes leaving permanent dents in your bangs. This daily battle was a fierce fight between the weight of gravity and vanity, and usually vanity won. The bigger your hair, the higher it towered, the closer it was considered to being cool. Yearbook photos from that era remain as vivid proof, showing giant clouds of bangs, mile-high ponytails, looking like blonde hair helmets that could withstand a wind tunnel. Everywhere friends walked, there was a faint scent of hairspray. Some even joked they were nearly flammable because of the amount of hairspray they used, but at the time, that was worth it. People judged each other's popularity by the size of their bangs. Having flat hair was considered social suicide. Looking back now, it seems ridiculous, but for those who lived through that time, there was no higher compliment than being told your hair looked totally awesome. Shoulder pads. Shoulder pads weren't just a fashion trend, they were a deep social statement. This was the decade when women started advancing more aggressively in the workforce, and they needed something to project power and authority. And shoulder pads were the answer. Everything from jackets, blouses, to evening gowns came attached with these monstrous foam or padded inserts. They made the wearer's figure look square, powerful, and even a little intimidating. TV icons like Joan Collins in her role as Alexis Carrington in the series Dynasty turned shoulder pads into a legend. However, it was the very popularity and exaggeration of this trend that turned it into something embarrassing to look back on. Over time, shoulder pads stopped feeling authoritative and shifted toward humorous. They started looking cartoonish as people competed to make them bigger, wider, and stiffer. What makes us feel the most cringe is how unnatural they were. They distorted the natural body shape to create an illusion of power. Although the trend has made a comeback in recent years, they have been highly refined and significantly downsized. Regardless, the legacy of 80s shoulder pads remains a reminder that sometimes, in our effort to look powerful, we accidentally end up looking funny. Clocks on chains. In the fashion world of the 80s, wearing a watch wasn't just about telling time. It was a statement about status, luxury, or in this case, sheer size and flamboyance. No one took the concept of time to a new level quite like Public Enemy rapper Flavor Flav. He popularized the trend of wearing not a dainty pocket watch, but actual, large-sized wall clocks dangling on chains around his neck. That massive clock looked like something ripped from a doctor's waiting room or kitchen corner. The issue wasn't just the size, it was the absurdity and the weight of it. But for Flavor Flav, that wasn't absurdity. It was a message about the value of time. He explained it was to remind people about the importance of the present moment, proclaiming, "Time is heavy, man." The clock worn around the neck became Flavor Flav's indispensable personal symbol, helping him stand out and be unique. Of course, for ordinary people, mimicking that style didn't look cool at all. It just made them look like they were carrying their entire kitchen around their necks. But that was the spirit of the 80s. Everything had to be bigger, louder, and impossible to ignore. Flavor Flav's gigantic clock became the perfect symbol for that era, where extravagance was celebrated and time truly had weight. Stirrup Pants. Stirrup pants are a classic example of 1980s fashion trying to combine practicality with style and failing completely at both. These leggings, made of every synthetic material known to man, featured a distinctive strap that looped under the foot, designed to keep the pant leg from riding up. In reality, that strap pulled awkwardly at the ankle, made the wearer's feet sweaty, and bunched up socks in strange places. Despite knowing the discomfort, we still wore them. They came in all sorts of bright colors, bold patterns, stretchy and shiny, and were often paired with oversized sweaters or jackets. The look was truly a visual contradiction. From the knee up, you looked serious like a school principal, but from the knee down, you looked like a gymnast caught mid-stretch. Sure, they sagged in weird places. Sure, they made your calves look like sausages, but they were a staple item, loved, mocked, and fiercely missed. For anyone who wore them, stirrup pants were more than a fashion choice. They were a commitment, a spandex stretch, and an essential rite of passage of the 80s. Which fashion item or piece of technology among these first five do you think is the most embarrassing masterpiece? Share below. Family portraits. If you grew up in the 80s, you definitely have at least one family portrait tucked deep inside a memory box. Back then, there were no smartphones, so to get a decent picture, the whole family had to gather at a professional studio. Coordinated neon outfits were the unspoken rule. Everyone had to wear pastels or acid-washed denim, creating a chaotic yet synchronized color palette. What makes these photos so embarrassing are the awkward poses the photographer forced us into. Everyone had to place their hand on the shoulder of the person next to them as stiffly as possible. We looked tense, forced, and like we were auditioning for a cheap soap opera. Maybe one person was tilting their head unnaturally to the side, or the whole family was staring intensely at some non-existent distant point with a frozen smile. Although the purpose of these portraits was to show family unity and preserve memories, today they have become the clearest evidence of an entire decade's aesthetic failure. We used to think they were perfect, but now we just see rock-hard hairspray and oversized jeans creating a scene full of nostalgia, but also a lot of embarrassment. Crimped hair. While Aqua Net was the secret weapon for achieving maximum hair height, the crimping iron was the tool for creating structured chaos. Crimped hair was that wild zigzag style, pressed into small, sharp waves, creating a thick and messy texture. This trend started emerging in the late 70s thanks to Barbra Streisand, but truly became the all-out obsession of the 80s. When finished, your hair looked like it had just gone through a mild electric shock, voluminous and strangely stiff. For women, and even some men back then, crimped hair was a symbol of rebellion and style. It went hand in hand with neon scrunchies and heavy makeup. However, looking back, many of us burst out laughing and asked ourselves, what were we thinking? Crimped hair wasn't usually soft. It was frayed and looked dry and stiff, creating an artificial hair volume that wasn't charming at all. The legacy of crimped hair is a reminder that sometimes we get swept up in a collective trend so much that we forget basic aesthetics. Fortunately, this trend mostly only appears now in comedy movies and nostalgic costume parties. Sweaters draped over shoulders. If the shoulder pad symbolized power in the boardroom, the sweater draped over the shoulders was the ultimate symbol of prep school privilege. The sweater was treated like an oversized scarf, carefully draped across the shoulders and often intentionally positioned to show off an expensive designer label. The sweater was usually tied gently or simply left loose, as if the wearer might need it at any moment. But in reality, it served only as an accessory to show social status. It didn't matter if it was 80 degrees outside or snowing heavily. Those who owned it seemed to be shouting the slogan, "I'm classy, I'm confident, and I have enough money to turn a functional item into a useless decoration." It created an impression of elitism, even a little arrogance, which many ordinary folks tried to imitate, but ended up looking incredibly forced. This trend was linked to the preppy culture and was popularized by movies and magazines of the time. However, in the modern era, it has become an outdated symbol of the elite, considered too flashy and unnecessary. In today's age, where fashion must ensure style and trendiness while also meeting high standards of convenience and practicality, this draped sweater is a memory that, when seen in old photos, makes us shake our heads at the absurdity of using clothing that way. Velcro sneakers. The 80s were a time of convenience and new technology. Science gave us Velcro, and for many, the Velcro fasteners on sneakers felt like a miracle from the future that saved time tying shoelaces. I remember those bulky white leather sneakers equipped with Velcro straps. They were seen as the ultimate upgrade, especially for those who didn't want to waste a single second lacing up. Every time you took them off, they made that unmistakable, distinctive rip-rip sound.
That prevent them from sticking, right? And
that sound at the time was the bell tolling for convenience. However, the cringe didn't take long to appear. Although Velcro came across as an innovation, it didn't stay cool for long. The straps quickly wore out, losing their stickiness. Worse, they were magnets for dirt, lint, and hair, making the shoes start to look somewhat childish and extremely messy. That feeling when the Velcro strap no longer stuck, leaving only a frayed layer of fabric covered in debris, is an embarrassing memory for anyone who owned them. After a brief moment representing the future, Velcro shoes were quickly demoted, viewed as shoes for children or the elderly. They became an example of a promising technology that lacked aesthetics and durability, proving that sometimes the simplicity of shoelaces is still the best option. New Coke. The story of New Coke is one of the costly lessons about never trying to change an icon. In the early 80s, Coca-Cola felt threatened as Pepsi was attracting younger people with a sweeter taste. Coke gradually lost market share, and following this, Coca-Cola made a bold and disastrous decision, changing the classic formula in 1985. The company believed the new, sweeter flavor would easily beat Pepsi and appeal to the new generation. And so, New Coke was born, advertised as having a sweeter, smoother taste. But they made a classic mistake. Immediately after the announcement, loyal Coca-Cola fans were outraged. This wasn't just an issue of flavor, it was about pride and memory. The whole country seemed to erupt. Stores were flooded with complaint calls, people organized protests, wrote letters, and even hoarded old cans of Coke as if they were gold. New Coke, instead of being a revolution, became a joke, a symbol of corporate arrogance.
And it does. What we didn't know was how many thousands of you would phone and write asking us to bring back the classic taste of original Coca-Cola.
They gambled their legacy and almost lost. Just 79 days after its launch, the company had to bow to public pressure and bring the original formula back, renaming it Coca-Cola Classic. This costly lesson from New Coke served as a wake-up call to the entire world, especially for those who try to chase the new and lose the defining characteristic of their brand. Parachute pants. Parachute pants were the embodiment of sound and movement in 80s fashion. Originally, they were designed specifically for breakdancers who needed comfort and durability to perform complex moves on the floor. However, like every other major fashion trend of the decade, parachute pants quickly moved off the dance floor to become popular streetwear. They were made almost entirely of nylon, tight at the waist and ankles, but puffed up in the thigh area, and often came in bright, shiny colors. Their most memorable and most embarrassing feature was the distinctive with every step. You could hear someone wearing parachute pants from down an entire hallway. Parachute pants were loud in every sense, visually, audibly, and stylistically. They were the ultimate way to say, "I got the moves," even if you couldn't break dance at all. Wearers wanted attention, and that noisy nylon ensured that every pair of eyes and ears was focused on them. They were once considered cooler than cool, a symbol of modern pop culture and an indispensable part of any stylish youth's wardrobe. But looking back, the bulkiness, the shine, and the relentless noise made them ridiculous. Parachute pants are a symbol of the decade's excess and exaggeration, a fashion item we once loved but now just want to hide away. The mullet. The mullet is perhaps the most ridiculed haircut of the 80s and 90s. It wasn't just a hairstyle, it was a life philosophy summarized in the legendary phrase, "business in the front, party in the back." This philosophy reflected a clear contradiction in the popular culture of the time, the desire to be rebellious and unique, while still maintaining minimal formality, to satisfy elders and the workplace. In the front, the hair was cut short and neat, creating a responsible and professional look. But in the back, everything changed completely. The hair was grown long, wild, and flowing, ready for any fun. The mullet became the hairstyle of choice for men, and women too, who wanted a strong personality while still maintaining the necessary formality. It was worn by rock stars, hockey players, and your next-door neighbor. But it's that very contrast that makes it embarrassing to look back on. It often looked messy, unbalanced, and usually involved the overuse of hairspray to keep the top stable while the back flowed freely. Today, the mullet is mostly a joke. It's very difficult for someone to wear this hairstyle in the modern era without being seen as trying to recreate it humorously. This hairstyle proves that the blind confidence of the 80s led us to accept a look that today we just want to erase from fashion history. It's an undeniable cultural legacy, but also a memory we look back on with a little regret and a lot of awkwardness. If this video brings back a lot of 80s memories, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so we can take more trips down memory lane together. Suits with pastel shirts and ties. If there is one show that defined men's style in the 80s, it has to be Miami Vice. This show elevated the suit jacket into a symbol of cool and danger, but in a way that was unique to the decade. This style was heavily inspired by the two famous detectives, Don Johnson, Sonny Crockett, and Philip Michael Thomas, Rico Tubbs. They transformed the traditional suit into something completely new. Instead of wearing suits with classic white shirts, they paired light-colored or white suits with open-collar pastel shirts. The key was no tie, or if there was one, it was a thin, similarly colored tie, creating a look considered effortlessly cool. It was a statement that you were wealthy enough not to worry about regular dress codes. However, the cringe happened when this style spread beyond the TV screen. Unless you had the cold, rugged demeanor of the TV detectives, most people wearing it looked like they were attending a wedding in a cheap soap opera. The lack of a tie, combined with the overly light colors of the shirt, made many people look like they were trying too hard to look fashionable. Even worse, those trying to sport this style were often teased about whether they were heading off to buy a speedboat. This style became too heavily associated with Miami Vice and a very specific 80s kind of stylishness. Its legacy is a reminder that sometimes trying to recreate the look of TV stars just makes us look like a clumsy knockoff version. Aqua Net Hairspray. If the 80s were the decade of big hair, then Aqua Net was the secret weapon and the chemical foundation behind every towering hairstyle. This wasn't just hairspray, it was hairspray with industrial strength. It had the power to fix your hair against gravity, humidity, or even a small storm. I still clearly remember the smell of Aqua Net. It was a powerful, almost toxic chemical scent that you could smell in every mall, every party, and every rock concert. Its smell hit you like a ton of bricks as soon as you walked into a room. It was the scent of boldness and defiance. The cringe lies in the final result of using too much Aqua Net. Although everyone back then dreamed of having enormous hair like rock stars and supermodels, due to the massive amount of spray used, the result was often stiff, shiny hair that looked like a helmet made of hair, instead of a magnificent creation. The hair didn't move. It was a fixed block of plastic on the head, defying all laws of physics. This obsession caused us to waste a massive amount of hairspray, contributing to a hole in the ozone layer. Today, when we prioritize soft, naturally moving hair, the stiff, overly fixed hair of the 80s becomes humorous proof that we were willing to sacrifice comfort and natural appearance to achieve maximum volume. Acid-washed jeans. Acid-washed jeans were the bold and noisy combination of punk and glam rock styles, giving an unmistakable look. It was denim that looked like it had just lost a fierce battle with a bucket of bleach. I remember this trend was so popular that people were obsessed with bleaching their own denim at home. This process usually involved soaking jeans in chlorine bleach and water, creating uneven patches of white and pale blue that looked deliberately splotchy and dirty. The result was a rough, stiff fabric that sometimes even smelled strongly of bleach. The acid-washed jeans trend was quickly listed among the decade's most questionable fashion trends. They were not subtle. They wanted attention. What was even more embarrassing was the double denim trend, where people combined both an acid-washed jacket and acid-washed jeans at the same time. This combination was a visual assault. Too much denim, too much washing, and too much effort to look cool. Acid-washed jeans were an indispensable part of the wardrobe back then, paired with high-top shoes and rock band t-shirts. However, looking back, most of us agree that this was a serious mistake in material and color choice. They became a symbol of a time when flashiness was considered class, and they are one of the items we are most hesitant to see reappear on modern fashion runways. Valspeak, Slang. While 80s fashion made us visually and physically cringe, the Valspeak slang made us feel cringe auditorily. Valspeak was a characteristic accent and communication style born in the San Fernando Valley, the Valley in Los Angeles. It was heavily popularized by Frank Zappa's hit Valley Girl and quickly spread across America, becoming the voice of youth culture and mall life. The defining features of Valspeak were a high-pitched voice, dramatic pauses in unnecessary places, and the overuse of the word like every 5 seconds. The phrase, "Oh my God, like, seriously, like, I can't even, like, believe it," is a prime example of its redundancy and meaninglessness. For those who didn't use it, or older people trying to understand, Valspeak caused definite discomfort. The reaction from outsiders was often to want to gag me with a spoon. Showing the level of irritation this speaking style caused, it was seen as shallow, unintelligent, and an expression of excessive youth innocence. Although annoying to some, Valspeak is a snapshot of youth culture and the rise of shopping malls as the new social centers. Nuances of Valspeak still appeared in later popular culture, such as the character Cher in the movie Clueless. It is a reminder of how we once tried to reshape language to assert generational difference. Fax machines. Before email and dial-up internet became common, the fax machine was a communication breakthrough for business. They felt like magic to companies, allowing them to instantly send documents over phone lines. The fax machine revolutionized how business was done. It created a new era of immediacy and global connection. But like Betamax, the cringe quickly caught up with this new technology. With the arrival of email and the ability to send large attachments with perfect quality, the magic of the fax machine quickly became obsolete and now feels overblown. It became a bulky, slow machine that required special paper, usually thermal paper, and created long, shrieking beep-beep sounds. The awkwardness comes from remembering how much time was wasted waiting for a document to be faxed, only to receive a smeared or incomplete copy. One joker even called it just a waffle iron with a telephone attached. The fax machine, although once an essential tool, has now become a nostalgic symbol of the early days of high-speed communication, but at a speed that today's generation would never accept. Just say no. Just say no was a famous political and social slogan of the 80s. It was a short, catchy three-word slogan championed by First Lady Nancy Reagan, aimed at empowering children and teenagers to resist peer pressure and avoid drugs. This slogan was widely popularized through media campaigns and became a cultural icon of the decade. It represented a sincere effort to address the escalating drug crisis at the time. However, the cringe and negative public reaction quickly followed. The slogan was heavily criticized because it oversimplified a complex issue like drug addiction. Critics were angry about this simplification, arguing that addiction is a public health issue involving trauma, mental health, and deep social factors, not just a moral failing or a matter of willpower. Many felt that saying no wasn't always a feasible solution in real-life pressure situations. This campaign turned a public health crisis into a personal moral problem, ignoring the root causes and the need for treatment. While memorable, this is one of the most embarrassing efforts of the 80s because it did make a clear difference in drug use. It is an example of a good intention executed too naively and lacking understanding of the real issue, making it a heavily criticized legacy. Car surfing. If there's one 80s trend everyone agrees should stay in the past, it's the act of car surfing. This trend involved climbing onto the roof of a moving car. The false coolness of this act was cemented by popular culture, especially in the famous movie Teen Wolf, 1985, starring Michael J. Fox. In the movie, the car surfing scene looked totally awesome and was a radical act that showed youthful recklessness and freedom. It was an attention-grabbing action considered the height of daring. However, this was an extremely dangerous trend and far from harmless as it appeared on screen. The cringe here is linked to the tragic consequences. The person doing it could be thrown off like a rag doll with just one sharp break or a tight curve. Later statistics served as a chilling wake-up call. The CDC tracked 58 deaths and 41 serious injuries from 1990 to 2008 just because of car surfing. This is one of those rare cases where looking back with embarrassment is accompanied by relief that we survived that stupid trend. Car surfing is a wake-up call that everyone agrees should be forgotten, a reminder that not everything that looks cool in movies should be imitated in real life. Indoor smoking. Looking back at the 80s, one of the most shocking and hard-to-believe things is the widespread prevalence and acceptance of smoking indoors and in public places. Smoking in offices, grocery stores, restaurants, and on airplanes was completely normal. I still clearly remember the feeling of walking into a public space back then. The air was always heavy, a mix of cigarette smoke, hairspray, and cheap perfume. In an office environment, smoke spread everywhere. On airplanes, even though there were designated smoking and non-smoking sections, that boundary was completely meaningless. The smoke spread throughout the cabin, forcing non-smokers to breathe air that one flight attendant described as being at the bottom of a coal mine. This wasn't just an annoyance. It was a major public health problem. Although the dangers of secondhand smoke began to be widely warned about in 1986, the tobacco industry tried to downplay the risks and continue the habit. The cringe today comes from the fact that we can't believe society once accepted such a level of personal air pollution. Thinking that a person could light up a cigarette while others were eating dinner or even on a cross-country flight is unbelievable and shocking. The legacy of this habit is a reminder of the major changes in health awareness and personal rights we have achieved since the 80s. The 80s were the age of big statements and spectacular failures. Although we feel a little awkward looking back at those fashion and technology choices, these memories are still very precious. They are the pieces of our youth in the common story that our generation shares. So, what else do you find cringe, but also incredibly memorable when looking back at the 80s? Share your personal story so our community can reminisce, laugh together, and cherish the youth we lived through. See you in the next nostalgia video.